Listen, one question I just got is, can anyone take this class, or do you need programming knowledge? Well, you don't need programming knowledge. You need a certain amount of programming aptitude to take this class. Now, the programming knowledge that we would be talking about in a program like an iPhone development class might have something to do with Apple's development environment, Xcode, Objective-C, some of the low-level languages. But since the T in HTML is text, even though it's hypertext, we're dealing with characters which are just basically text characters. Now, of course, the HTML is hypertext markup language, so there is a certain amount of conventions that you do need to learn, and you will learn in this class about how to format HTML pages and how to use the markup language. But it's not really an exercise in programming as such. It's more of an exercise in design. The second class, the web developer, when we integrate more with databases, we will be using some structured query language, also known as SQL, which can be a programming language all on its own, but we're not approaching it as a programming language. We will have certain structured query language statements that we'll use. You'll have the opportunity to explore structured query language on your own a little bit further, and but you'll learn what you need to learn for this class in the class itself, which means you'll be constructing queries to pass information back and forth to the database. You really won't be programming anything particular with the databases themselves. In the last part of the class, with the WebMaster, the WebMaster Website Manager section, we'll be dealing with servers. And in the servers, it can be approached a couple of different ways. And generally, it's from a command line interface, which is the old black screen with the green letters typing commands in, which looks like programming, but it really isn't. It's just entering commands. And the other way is through a graphical interface, like on a Mac or a PC. Again, when that becomes more a function of administration rather than programming. So the long-winded answer to the question is, you don't need to know programming as such. And so that anyone who has an aptitude for design, an aptitude for computer-based design, whether it's Photoshop or the graphic arts, or even just if you're familiar with HTML, the old HTML3 and 4 standard, and not familiar with HTML5, you can certainly do what's needed to be successful in this class. So, if you've had programming before and you've done well with it, that even though that information doesn't transfer exactly into what we're doing now, the ability to learn a programming language is not going to be an impediment in any way to taking this class. It's just that if you haven't learned that programming language, that shouldn't hold you back either. Does that answer your question okay? Okay, another question. What kind of material will I need? Will I need some specific software? A good question also. The type of material that you'll need for it is essentially a web browser and a text editor. We're not using any kind of fancy design design programs like Dreamweaver. We don't need to use Dreamweaver at this level. You can certainly use it for cascading style sheets, which is a big component of the HTML5 standard. Basically, a text editor and a browser will get you going. Now, the one we do have the materials that are. Excuse me a minute. Just needed to silence my phone. I find the mute button on the phone works really well if you take the cord right out of the back. A browser text editor on it will get you through what you need for the HTML5 class. As we move into the database section, the database, you'll need hardware that's capable of running a local instance of MySQL server, PostgreSQL server also. The Mongo database stuff that we'll be doing will probably be hosted on a remote server, so you'd have to have the ability to actually access a remote server, which really shouldn't be a problem either as far, well, it should be an expense because the tools that we're using are all open source tools to access the data or to actually develop on our own local machines. Windows or Mac, either way should work fine. And for the website manager class, the last class, the ability to host Apache web server and the Nginx server on your local machine, which it doesn't take a lot of resources and is also freely available. So you won't really need anything specific that's commercial, but as we get into the classes, there'll be a list of the software that you'll need to download and install to use. But for the first class, it's certainly the beginning of the first class. As long as you have a text editor and a web browser, you should be okay. I would suggest if you're going to take the class that you if you have Windows, I would suggest that you download Firefox and Chrome to have those, or even on a Mac if you have Safari. Download Firefox and Chrome so that you have the browsers, because even though code is written to be platform agnostic and be able to be deployed on any different platforms and look the same, we find that there are certain non-standard standards that creep in and things will look different whether you're using a browser like Firefox or Internet Explorer. If you want to use HTML5 and be able to use HTML5 in that, you pretty much have to use IE9 for that. So having several different browsers is a good idea because it will it'll allow you to develop so that you can see what your code looks like in the different environments. The other thing that we'll be using in the class, and I have supplements for it that I'm going to use in the class, is our book. And our book is called HTML5 in the Digital Classroom. This one comes with a DVD or CD, one of those, of sample programs and exercises and stuff from the book. Now, you're not required to purchase this book because a lot of the stuff from this book is the materials used in the class. We actually use stuff from HTML5 Digital Classroom, the Microsoft Knowledge Base, and also we're using material from the IBM Academic Initiative. So we've got some fairly big commercial guns like Microsoft and IBM actually driving some of the open source software that we're going to be using, and will help us get a little bit deeper into the real world applications of the course material. Because it's nice to know if you're using open source material that there is some sort of commercial end to what you're doing. And the HTML5 standards, the open source databases, certainly the open source web servers, especially Apache. Apache is the largest used web server in the world, and it's not a commercial product. But having some commercial entities behind the open source movement will ensure that there is a certain progression towards employment, because those companies are looking to make money. And so there are fee-based things that you can do with the knowledge that you get. Another company that's not often thought of as doing open source work is Apple. Apple also, through its Darwin and its development of BSD Unix software, is also driving open source forward. Not directly related to HTML5, but is fairly directly related to some of the database formats that we'll be using, and certainly the deployments in the Apache web server. Did that answer your question in a very long way, Lennon? Okay, one of the questions that I've also gotten, which I think I addressed before, but it was when nobody could hear me, and I'm going to do it again. The question is, why should you invest in this class when you can find the online self-study for free? Which is an excellent question, and what you can find online are all the source materials that we'll be using, pretty much all the source materials. You know, certainly enough to create your own work at home, work from work, work on a self-paced classroom. If you've got the time, the inspiration, you have someone who can actually lead you along and teach it. The value in taking in spending, it's $29.95 if you take all 3 courses. If you take each course individually, it's $1,050. It's $29.95 and $2,995. If you can get that material for free yourself, and you have a knack, you have an ability for the materials, for web-based stuff, and you have enough time to search through the wealth of material, an overwhelming wealth of material that's available out there, to find what it is that you need to know, you can certainly do that. What we offer is a structured environment offered online so that you don't have to come to class. The instructor-led by me, point you in the right direction, and the materials and classes, it's a curated environment so that we know that the lessons that build upon the prior lessons all are leading towards a goal. That everything is structured in such a way that at the end of the first class we know that you will have a baseline knowledge of HTML5. We know that at the end of the second class you'll have a baseline knowledge of database integration with the HTML5 standard, and we know that by the end of the third class you will know what goes into the actual implementation of a web server and how to deploy your content, whether it's to the public on a web server, on a local network, or standalone. The idea of you'll know what's involved, so even if you're not a system administrator, you'll know what goes into system administration, so that when you develop your content, you can develop your content in such a way that it becomes deployable in the easiest fashion. It'd be the most simple and elegant websites, and the most simple and elegant deployments are likely to be the most commercially successful deployments because they can be expanded. Things are written so they're scalable. Let's see, I've always been asked if you ever need to come to the NJIT campus. Well, since this is entirely online, you don't have to come to campus. You can, if you're up here at NJIT, you can stop and say hello. We actually have some lab hours that we use for my iOS and for my Android students. We certainly have time up here, but you don't, unless you have a need to come here for some physical reason. The material is available to you online. Discussions are held in group forums and group chats in a written way. And we also have live chats, which are typically held they are held 8:30 to 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday evenings through the week 5 through week 8 of the course. The last 4 we actually have live conferences where we can work out ideas, work out problems, answer questions face-to-face and in real time. The other weeks the discussions are held in a forum, and usually what happens in the forum is a discussion gets going. If somebody asks me a question on it, the company line is that you be responded to within 24 hours after you answer a question. The reality is, since we all spend so much time in the forums, that unless you're asking me in the middle of the night here and I'm sound asleep, you'll probably get an answer from me in a couple of hours. And within a couple of hours, sometimes immediately if I'm in the class material itself. And that sometimes is a little bit better of a learning experience than even in a class situation where if you have questions that occur between your classes and you have to wait to see your professor or wait until your professor has office hours, the ability to actually ask me questions or ask each other questions in the forum environment is immediate. And it's been proven to be a very good learning model, that people learn better when they discuss things, discuss materials in that type of learning environment. Another question. What kind of certificate will I get? Will it come directly from NJIT? The kind of certificate you will get will be a certificate in, there's actually 4, to complete the course you'd actually get 4. There's a certificate of completion for each of the 3 sections of the course, and then the overall certification for the WebMaster Next Generation. You get a 4th one for the entire course on it, and that is, it does come directly from NJIT. As a student at NJIT, whether you're in professional development or credit, graduate studies on it, you become part of our student information system called Banner, and your progress through the classes, your progress is tracked, and certificates that you earned are recorded in your student transcript here, and that allows you to go back. If you have an employer who wants something more than just a printed certificate to show that you've actually taken a class, that we actually have a college-level transcript that you can be given for, that you can be provided to show that you have taken these classes and passed these classes. You know, assuming that you pass the classes, and passing these classes means actually producing and delivering the tasks during the modules, which meaning actually creating your HTML5 document, you're integrating it with a database, and working through the deployment on a web server. For each of these sections, you get a thing called a continuing education unit. And some professions, teaching, some engineering professions, require a certain amount of continuing education units over a course of time to keep their certificates active or to fulfill requirements of their certificate. And this class does provide continuing education units, which again are recorded in your student record and your student transcript. So the short answer is the certificate is a certificate from the class itself, and an overall certificate from the program, from the WebMaster program, and it does come directly from NJIT. Back before, when I was muted, I was talking about the length of class. Have I covered that again? If anyone can tell me. I'm not sure exactly what I all said when I was muted, but let's see. Maybe someone remembers. Okay, yeah, so just been asked. And how long is it? Okay. Each class is 8 weeks. The entire track, the 3 classes, are 24 weeks or 6 months. So the class that's begins next week, actually, a week from tomorrow, would end sometime at the very beginning of summer. You know, I guess early July, late June or early July. And I said they're in 8-week segments, and as soon as one stops, we finish one, the next section starts on the next week. So we run them continuously so that we have some continuity of covered material right up through the end of the class. And then at the end of the classes, you still have access to that online environment even though the class is over, which means that the materials that are used in the class, materials that you've developed, questions and answers that have been provided by me, by other students, and discussions are still available for you up to 6 months after the class is over. So that a class that begins here in January, even though the class is over in July, you have access to those class materials up through the end of the current year. And I've been asked, do I need to take all 3 classes? Let's start with the short answer first. Yes. Since the classes are cumulative, the HTML5 class produces a product which is used in the web developer class, which integrates the database functions in the WebAuthor HTML5 container, and then that's used to be deployed in a server environment in the Web Manager, the Website Manager class. So the short answer is yeah, you do need to take all three. It doesn't. You don't have to register for all three at once. You don't have to. You can register for a single class for $1,050. You don't have to register for the entire thing at once if you just want to see if it's for you or not. The only advantage to registering for all three is that there's a bit of a discount. There's a $145 or $150 discount if you get all three. But there isn't a compelling, beyond the discount, there's no compelling need to register for all three if you just want to find out what's going on in the individual classes. But it would be very difficult to try and jump into like a web developer or even a website manager class, because some of the things that you're going to need to actually perform in the class would have been constructed in a class before you got there. So it's there wouldn't really be any good way of you could follow the material, but it would be very difficult to actually complete the project, since the first part of the project was never done to begin with. I have a question from Eileen. The question is, weekly is 3 hours online. How long weekly will there be assignments? Now, 3 hours of material online will generate about 9 hours of study, so you've got about 12 hours a week there. And the other part is, how long weekly will there be assignments? There'll be assignments every week. Some will have more than others depending upon the specific material that we're covering, but we do have an assignment that's given in week 1 is due the day before week 3 begins, so you have essentially 2 weeks to complete all your assignments. In the beginning, you'll probably go through it quickly. You won't need 2 weeks to do them. Maybe for the first week, maybe it will, but I anticipate that as the class moves on and as things get a little bit more complex on it, it may take a little bit more time to get some of the tasks done. Eileen, did that answer your question? Okay. Yeah, 15 hours a week is a good target. Yeah, the Islands is she thought it would be 15 hours a week, and that's pretty much about the target that we're on. Another question is, besides the cost they'll pay for the 3 courses, do I have to pay anything else? Short answer is no. Everything is included in your 3 courses. You can supplement some of the things that you do. You can supplement them by getting the HTML5 book. And I'm not an author, and I don't get royalties for this, so I'm not pushing the book. But a lot of the material will be coming from here. And sometimes it's nice to have a printed reference available to you, especially since sometimes things are covered in more detail in printed format than is covered in a classroom situation. You might have to refer to the actual printed material itself. So there isn't any other costs. The things that you do need, I mean, you need a capable PC or Mac, a broadband internet connection to be able to access the course material. You definitely need that pipeline. And if you are a Mac user, you should use your Mac. If you're a Windows user, you should use your PC. There have been some people in some of the classes who went out and bought new computers, especially since Macs became popular, and would buy a new computer and then go into a classroom or online class learning environment. And it's difficult sometimes to learn the ins and outs of your tool, which is the computer, to learn a new skill. So PC or Mac, as long as you're familiar with the computer and you're fairly facile with the computer, you know its ins and outs, you shouldn't have any problem with the class. Oh, another question. How many students make up a class? Well, our baseline is 10 for a class, and if we get more than 10, we'll open up another section. But that doesn't mean that we'd open up another section if we had 12. If we had 12, we might have 12 students in class. Because to actually have a second section of class, since an online class relies so heavily on not only lessons given by me and questions answered and generally knowledge dispensed the student's way by me, by any instructor. So much of it depends upon discussion between students, discussions in the forum, so that topics can be handled in a group mode, because not everybody always has the single solution for a problem. Not everybody always has the single brilliant answer for any particular question. So if we go to, we could go over 10 students in this class, and we're close now. We're close to that now. If we go much over that, we'll spawn a second section and have 2 classes. But anytime we do that, our group discussions, we invite all of our, both of our classes and all of our students to participate in those group discussions. All right, that's the only other question I see for now. Anyone else with a question? Because what I'll do, if I get my mouse to work. Okay, we along with our with the group and the broadcast that we're doing here, we have some people who are listening in and responding in an RRC chat room. And I see we have a question. How many course hours are required weekly? I'm attending another school with 3 classes. I have to incorporate these into my schedule. Well, Janice, with 3 hours of classroom work, it's pretty much the same as an undergraduate program. Each hour of class material should spawn about 3 hours of work. So you need to have about 12 hours to spare. More is better, but if you're taking 3 other classes, time can get pretty tight depending upon what else that you were doing. It's certainly doable, but it depends upon, like I said, how much time you have for doing other things that you may need to do. A lot of people who take this class, the targeted audience are people who are either looking for IT professionals who are looking to upgrade their skills, or maybe IT professionals who are looking for different jobs or jobs themselves, and they want to enter the job market with the newest skills so that they can become marketable in the job market. If you're looking for a job, you probably have a little bit more time to spend than if you're working full-time. Maybe. I don't know. Sometimes looking for a job can be a full-time job, too. So if you can figure out that you can spare that amount of hours a week, you can probably do it. If for some reason that you're going to be, it's going to be tight and you can't spare more than 5 or 6 hours a week, it might be best to wait until your time becomes more available to take a class like this. Because you don't want to get into a class that's a cumulative class. It starts at week 1 and builds right on through week 8, and then starts at the next week 1 and builds on through week 8. If you run out of time, if you don't have time to keep up in the early sections of the class, since so much is built upon the early lessons, that it could cause a problem for you. Once you got lost in that environment, it's a little hard to get caught up. But if you have the time to do it, you can certainly succeed in that class. Janice, did that answer your question? Okay. Another question we've had is, what is a grant that was mentioned that you might be eligible for? Well, there is a segment of our students who can be funded by a grant called the H-1B grant. For people who are familiar with visas and immigrant status, an H-1B is a type of visa which allows someone to come into this country solely for the purpose of filling a job that no one here is qualified to do. So NJIT and a group of community colleges up in North Jersey received a grant to train people to take those positions, people from this country to take those positions that people may be being imported for. So that's what's called the H-1B grant. What it does is, if you are unemployed, you can go to your local county one-stop and actually speak to them about the program. There's also contacts here we have at NJIT, but you have to start by going to your one-stop as an unemployed person and inquire about the H-1B grant there. If you qualify for the H-1B grant, you can be awarded up to the limit of the tuition for the class, which, I mean, there's a fancy way of saying that if you qualify for the grant, you can get the class for free. There are stipulations and limitations on funding and when the grant is refreshed, but the place to check is at your local county one-stop. And another question is, when does the next round of classes begin when the current set ends in July? Right now, it looks like we're finishing up in July, and we'll start the next round of classes along with the start of the fall semester, which would mean it's going to be starting very late August or very early September. So while that won't be quite as continuous as running the classes back to back to back, the 8-week segments that we're doing now, it will give a chance for the instructor to catch his breath for a month before we go into the next class. And that's not only is it everybody likes a little time off, but it's not only important for that, but since this field with HTML5, web development and web deployment and web management is a moving target, it also gives me a chance to actually update the information so that the most current stuff is always available. And I would spend time between the two classes taking a look at the second class to see what needs to be amended or changed there too. So again, we're looking at finishing up in July and then starting again in September. I've also been asked if there's tutoring available for persons who struggle with CSS and database functions. Tutoring, not exactly tutoring on a one-on-one, although that it's possible that could be arranged, but in the group format that we have, you will be able to get the support that you need. There are plenty of resources inside, in and outside the class, but also inside the class. If we have a group of 10 people in a class, not everybody's going to get everything right away anyway. And some people may have some difficulty. I mean, CSS can be tricky. If you look at CSS3, it can be tricky. But we will, if you need help, we will provide help. One-on-one tutoring, we probably have to address that as the need arose. Another question we had was, experienced troubles when I tried to register for this course online, and asked who could help me with that. Our registration guru is Brian Penzak. You can reach him at penzak@njit.edu. I'll type the email address right in so that you can see it in the chat window. As soon as I highlight the chat window. Okay, hopefully you can straighten out the registration difficulties. Sometimes it isn't the most intuitive process, registering for these classes. That's where we try to give everybody the support they need, because we want you to be able to register in the class. We don't want you to be frustrated and just walk away in frustration. Now, the registration for the class will be open right through next Tuesday. You can register right up to the day before the class. So we do have some time where difficulties can be worked out before the class starts. Some of the classes, registration is open right through the first day. I'm not certain about this one, but it's entirely, I know it's open through Tuesday. It may be open right through the first day of class next Wednesday. And on next Wednesday, the class materials will be released about 1 p.m. in the afternoon. And once we get a class roster, you'll be getting an email from me about how to access it, because you have to we create a user account in a learning management software called Moodle, and we're using that for all three of the classes. So you'll create your account in the learning management software on it. Then you're enrolled in the class itself, and then off we go from there. Okay, I'm going to ask, how easy is Moodle to use? Well, if you're really familiar with it, it's really easy. But even if you're not so familiar with it, it's not terribly difficult either. It's a learning management software. I'll type down here if anybody wants to take a look at the actual deployment of the software. I'll put the URL down here. Which for people in IRC is http://Moodle, MOODLE.org. From that site, you can see what goes on with the Moodle learning management software. And I think you'll find I've never had a student who was not successful in a class because they had problems with the actual learning management software. Online learning is different than classroom learning. Sometimes you need a little bit more motivation because you're subject to all the distractions of your workplace or your home. But the actual software itself is written by, it's actually out of Australia originally, and it's written by teachers for teachers at the time. So hopefully by writing it by teachers for teachers, we actually included some benefit for the students that we're supposed to be teaching there too. Okay, I don't know exactly what I haven't covered yet. If there's any other particular questions, hardware, software, we've covered the book. The classes are running online. Materials available 24 hours a day. Covered the cost of the classes. Some help with registration, hopefully. Okay, well here's another question. All right. I asked someone who's interested in developing apps and wondering if this class would help with that. Okay, we're talking about developing apps. We'll assume you're talking about a mobile device app, something for Android or something for iOS, or even something for the desktop. It's all possible. Using HTML5, you can write code. I shouldn't say write code, that scares people sometimes, but you can actually develop websites or develop a program that will run without a server and will run inside of a browser, because the browsers are becoming more and more like their own standalone operating systems anyway. They'll run inside of a browser for an iPhone or an Android phone, and for, if it is released, or when it's released, for the new BlackBerry device. The new BlackBerry device it's been reported and reported. It hasn't been released yet, and it's probably not going to have a big market share, but the idea is that it will run on those environments and also on the whatever the next generation of the Windows Phone turns out to be. It should run on that too. And I was also asked how many students make up a class, and I said our target for a class is 10. We don't want to get too far over that target, but we will increase it past 10 a little bit before we open up a second section, because there is a real value, a real need in interaction in the classes. You don't want to take an online class with an instructor and just yourself. You absolutely have to have some sort of interaction between other students and some discussion for the online experience to really be valuable. Without that interaction on it, you might be better off in a regular class where you can actually see people and talk to them than in an online class essentially by yourself. Oh, another question. What code is used in conjunction with HTML? That is JavaScript, Perl, etc. JavaScript is big. JavaScript is a very big deal. jQueries and JavaScript are used extensively. But it's not limited to just that. You can also use Python. If anybody's used the Python language, it's an open source language. It's a language we would call mature because it's been around for quite a while on it. Also asked about Perl. Perl isn't used as much as it used to be. Perl was sort of expanded with and added to with PHP. And PHP actually stands for the Perl Hypertext Preprocessor. So while they're not exactly the same language, PHP is based on the code-based language base of Perl itself. So you'll find a lot of conventions in Perl that were ported over to PHP. So JavaScript, yeah. PHP, yeah. There'll be some Python. Python will be available. And we will talk about some of the Ruby and the way Ruby is implemented in some of these, in some of the deployments too. Ruby is its own language, and while what we're doing is an overview of the development process in HTML5 and through database deployment and through the website management, we're not going to be a class that's going to be involved in actually the how-tos of the actual languages itself, other than hypertext markup language. So that while we'll touch some of these other languages, we won't go into too much depth, although we will have the resources available for people to explore them further on their own in the context of the class, so that they can do their projects. Is that what you needed to know, Janice? Another question: if your English is not your native language, if your English is a second language, would it be inconvenient to take the course? Well, there's a couple of different things. It depends upon if you can understand Internet English. You'd probably do fine in this course, because a lot of the conventions on the Internet, whether the languages, either the languages written in C or Perl, they all are based on an English English word base, not a code base. So I have had students take online classes, not this particular class, but online classes who did not have English as their primary language, and it was not an impediment to them completing the courses in any way. If your English is good enough to communicate in the chat area the way you have been on it, you're probably okay with the class itself. Remember, since it is an online class, you don't have to sit and listen to me and say, what the heck did he just say? it's an online class, so the material is available to you 24 hours a day. So if there's something that you don't think you quite understood, you can review it. I don't think that the language demands, the conversant language demands of the class are excessive. I think that anyone who's available to come on in a chat and chat in another language probably has enough skills to take a class like this. And it looks like I did actually answer Janice's question, so I'm glad for that. Okay, anyone else have anything? We've only got a couple of minutes left here, so if anyone else has any other questions, please fire away, metaphorically speaking. All right. Joseph just said that he's looking forward to taking the class and working with everyone. Well, I'm looking forward to having as many of you in the class as we possibly can get into the class. And said if we run into more than 10 people, we'll figure out how we'll proceed from there. But no one's going to get lost in a class with either no one in it or a class with so many people in it that they can't get the help that they need. I had been asked when the last day to register. The last day to register for this is the day before the class, which would be next Tuesday, the 22nd. Because of the Martin Luther King holiday the day before, registration could be extended into Wednesday, but I'm not certain about that. So if you want to register for the class, I'm not saying you have to do it this minute. It would be nice if you did, but you don't have to do it this minute. But I wouldn't wait much past the weekend coming up. Oh, another question. I was asked if Dreamweaver can be used along with HTML5. Yes, because HTML5 is text, and Dreamweaver is a big, fancy text editor. So you can use HTML5 conventions in Dreamweaver. Okay, and a question from Eileen asked, how far along in the course can you start looking for a job using this? Some of that's going to depend upon where you start out with before you take the class, what level that you're at. But I would say that after the first class in HTML5, you should start looking then, even as you continue through the other parts of the class, because HTML5 gives you a foundation, but there are other things that need to be integrated in with HTML5, database and deployment. If your interest is as a developer, you can start looking after the HTML5 class, and you probably become employable after you've had the database class. It may not be necessary for employment to go all the way through the website manager class, although by not taking that third class or not having the experiences in that third class, you're kind of limited because you don't really know when you create a project what the other side of that project is, and the other side of all those projects is always deployment. If you can write it and write a great app or a great fancy project, but if there's no place that can host it, or if you don't have the resources to get it out there on the public internet or a private internet, then it becomes kind of difficult, and it becomes a nice little bit of code that may not be going anywhere. So I would say I would start looking at the end of the first class. You're probably getting the skills enough to become employed by the end of the second class, and after the third class, or who knows, maybe get hired while you're taking the third class. But I don't see any reason why that as soon as you get the knowledge to actually go forward that you couldn't go forward with it. Although, like I said, after the HTML5 class, even though you've got some knowledge, your experience is pretty limited. You can start looking. I don't know if you get hired strictly off of that class, though. Did that help, Eileen, or not? I don't know. Good. Eileen said it helped. Okay, are there any more questions? One thing we'll be doing is a transcript of this, actually the video itself. We'll have a little light editing for it, and then it will be available on our YouTube channel. And if you've been, since we probably have your email address for this, once the video is ready, we'll be sending it out by email. So there'll be a link where anything that if you need to review what I might have said or what's been covered, you'll have that opportunity, and the address where to find it. Okay, then I'm going to thank everyone for coming. The hour went quickly, even though it was partly muted by me for a while, but maybe that's the part I'll edit out of the video before I actually post it. So, class begins next week. Class starts at 1 p.m. on next Wednesday. You can register up through Tuesday for the class. Just don't wait too long in case we get filled up and run into a multiple section situation, which we'll still be able to handle one way or another, but it's best if we can get our class structures arranged as early as we can so everybody knows which section they're in and how we're going to teach it. Oh, we have another question coming in. Oh, Rosalind's asking, are we still having a meeting tomorrow on campus? We are having an online class orientation tomorrow. It's from 1 to 2:30 p.m. at Fenster Hall at NJIT in one of our labs here, where we're just going to go over the basics of what's involved in an online environment. It's not strictly about this class, this upcoming class, but an introduction to the online environment. I'll get a chance to show everybody who attends Moodle, how Moodle works in the online environment. And another question just popped up. Can anyone attend? Sure can. And anybody can. We have 21 seats in the room that we're using, and I think we have 6 or 7 confirmed. But the more the merrier. We can share computers, and we have plenty of shares. So anyone who wants to come, certainly welcome. Okay, how to get information about the class tomorrow. You're talking about the class, the orientation tomorrow. Okay, probably the best thing about that, the easiest way to handle that would be to email me directly. And put my email address in here, and then I can respond to you with the actual particulars, because the person who's helping to coordinate this with me is not available right now. He's not in the Hangout or in chat. So I'll take care of it. Okay, there I am, Kellers at njit.edu. And we've put it over here in the IRC room too. Okay, I just added the information to the IRC room, so anyone who might be watching it will be able to see that information when it comes around in a moment or two. Okay, anyone else? Okay, well, again, thank you all for coming. If you have any specific questions or anything, you have my email address there. And the video will be reviewable after YouTube and Google finish processing it probably sometime this afternoon. So thank you all again, and I look forward to the class beginning next week, and I'd sure like to see you all in class. Thanks a lot, everybody.